September 18th, 2024. A silent Miami waterfront mansion is suddenly abuzz with activity. FBI agents, assisted by Miami police, surrounded the luxury home with their weapons drawn. The neighbors heard sounds, suspecting a robbery happening in the house.
Boom. And, we thought that was a shooting in the neighborhood. And we saw a lot of police. This was something that never happened in this neighborhood.
Which is an unusual activity for a house that was hosting million-dollar parties just a few days ago. But what the neighbors didn't know was that the house is occupied by a Singaporean tourist whose visa has long expired. If that's not enough, the 20-year-old boy has recently scammed a victim out of $230 million worth of cryptocurrency. The Singaporean tourist is Malone Lam, and Jean Serrano was the accomplice. And this is how they did it. Malone Lam had learnt about a new scam via online forums. Equipped with this new information and along with his partner in crime, Jean Serrano, Malone Lam had been looking for the perfect victim to commit the scam. They found one individual on August 2024 in Washington, D.C. Somewhere in the city, a wealthy cryptocurrency investor, let's call him the victim, has no idea that he's about to lose everything. His mistake? Being too rich and too careless. Lam and Serrano had been watching him for weeks. The victim was a high net worth investor from the early days of cryptocurrency, someone with massive holdings but outdated security practices. And that made him the perfect target. For the next few days, their plan was set in motion. The unfortunate man's phone and email were bombarded with fake Google security alerts, warnings that someone was trying to access his account from overseas. The victim was worried. He checked his emails, his notifications, his Google security logs. Something was wrong, but not what he was thinking it to be. He believed the emails to be true, meeting Lam and Serrano's expectations. On August 18th, 2024, the victim's phone rang. On the other end was someone claiming to be from Google's security team. There had been a serious hacking attempt, the caller said. They needed to shut down the account immediately. Panicked, the victim followed their instructions. He gave them the security codes they needed. While his partner was on call, Lam in that moment logged into the victim's Gmail and OneDrive accounts. He searched for clues about cryptocurrency holdings. And then he struck gold. A file containing the victim's Gemini crypto exchange records. Lam called the victim, pretending to be Gemini's security team. "Your account has been compromised," he said. "We need you to move your funds to a secure wallet while we investigate." The victim believed them. And just like that, he transferred $3 million worth of crypto into a wallet controlled by Lam. But the duo wasn't done. They asked the victim to download a remote desktop connection program for his security, getting real-time access to the victim's computer. Serrano continued asking the victim to open files, some which had private keys to over 4,100 Bitcoin. As Serrano was on call, Lam used the access keys to access the Bitcoin. And just like that, one of the largest cryptocurrency thefts from a private individual in US history had just happened. Now it was time to party. Stealing $230 million in Bitcoin was one thing. Spending it without getting caught, that was another challenge entirely. If Lam and Serrano simply cashed out the Bitcoin, law enforcement would trace it instantly. They needed to wash the money and make it disappear before anyone could connect it back to them. That's where crypto mixers came in. Lam and Serrano moved the stolen Bitcoin through various mixing services, platforms designed to shuffle cryptocurrency transactions, making it harder to track the original source. But they didn't stop there. They used peel chains and pass-through wallets. Peel chains refers to a method where funds are broken into small transactions across hundreds of wallets, slowly dispersing the money to avoid detection. Some of these funds were then converted into different cryptocurrencies on various exchanges. Other portions were sold through peer-to-peer transactions, exchanging Bitcoin for cash in person to avoid exchange scrutiny. By the time law enforcement even realized what had happened, a large chunk of the stolen Bitcoin had already been laundered. And with their new fortune, Lam and Serrano were ready to enjoy their spoils. What followed was one of the most insane spending sprees the FBI had ever seen. Imagine a 20-year-old boy with no earning source, indulging in designer brands, supercars, and luxury rentals. How can he afford them? He is not selling narcotics. With millions in stolen Bitcoin, Malone Lam did what any reckless 20-year-old scammer would do: spend like there was no tomorrow. His first stop, luxury cars. Lam splurged on 31 high-end vehicles, including custom Lamborghinis, Ferraris, and Porsches. Some of these cars were worth over $3 million each. And he wasn't just collecting them, he was showing off. One of his sports cars even had his name, Malone, painted on the side, a move that would later prove to be his downfall. It made it easier for authorities to track his assets. Next, real estate. Lam rented multiple luxury homes in Los Angeles and Miami, throwing down insane amounts of money on high-end rentals. One of them, a waterfront mansion on Miami's exclusive Hibiscus Island, cost him $68,000 a month. Another one in California, $47,500 a month. This was Serrano's home in Encino. The boys weren't just living in these properties, they were throwing wild parties in them, spending nights surrounded by partygoers and Instagram influencers. And then there were the nightclubs. Lam was burning through cash at a pace that even the richest playboys in LA and Miami couldn't match. At high-end clubs in both cities, he regularly dropped up to $400,000 to $500,000 in a single night. At one club in Los Angeles, he spent $569,528.39 in one go. The receipts were staggering. His orders? Bottles of the most expensive champagne, private tables, and extravagant tips for staff. He even tried paying for drinks in cryptocurrency. Rolexes, diamond jewelry, designer handbags worth tens of thousands of dollars. The boys were totally in a splurge mode. Serrano spent millions decorating his California house with high-end furniture and accessories. For a brief moment, Lam and Serrano thought they could live like kings. But their reckless spending wasn't just catching the attention of partygoers and Instagram influencers, it was catching the attention of the FBI. And their facade was about to come crashing down. September 18th, 2024. The party was over. For a full month after the heist, Lam and Serrano had lived without fear, convinced that their fortune was untouchable. They had laundered millions, spent lavishly, and left a trail of excess across Los Angeles and Miami. But what they didn't realize was that law enforcement was closing in. The FBI had been quietly tracking their movements, piecing together evidence from bank transactions, club receipts, crypto exchanges, and luxury car purchases. And then Serrano got in trouble. He took a vacation to the Maldives with his girlfriend. When he landed back in Los Angeles, the FBI was waiting. Agents swarmed him the moment he stepped off the plane at LAX airport. Within minutes, he was in handcuffs. But what happened next sealed Lam's fate. The FBI interrogated Serrano's girlfriend. They warned her not to tip off Serrano's associates as it will only make the situation worse, but she called Lam right away. Lam wiped his Telegram account immediately, deleted messages, and tried to erase any trace of his involvement. But it was too late.
On an unsuspecting Wednesday night, the FBI, with the assistance of Miami police, raided this waterfront mansion near Miami Shores, spooking neighbors.
Here's how it went down.
Boom. And, we thought that was a shooting in the neighborhood. And we saw a lot of police. This was something that never happened in this neighborhood.
They found luxury cars, expensive watches, and stacks of cash. Lam was arrested on the spot. At the same time, the FBI raided another property linked to Lam in Los Angeles, where more stolen assets were seized. But despite his wealth, there was nowhere left to run. He was charged with conspiracy to commit wire fraud and money laundering. And the most shocking part, out of the 31 luxury cars he bought, 22 are still missing. The authorities have no idea where they are. And even now, a significant amount of the stolen $230 million is still unaccounted for. But that didn't matter anymore. Lam wasn't getting out of this. Upon digging into him, the investigators found that Malone Lam had no permanent residence, no work permit, no visa. He came to the United States in October 2023 through the U.S. Visa Waiver Program that allows tourists to stay for up to 90 days without a visa. He had been living illegally in the U.S. for almost a year up until his arrest. Prosecutors said they have screen recordings capturing Lam using the $$ Telegram handle and Anne Hathaway Discord display name to discuss strategies to manipulate the victim. Serrano uses the online names Versace God and @Skidstar. Authorities said they have numerous documents and photos connecting the $$ Telegram handle to Lam. One of the photos shows Lam with a new white sports car, with his name painted on the side. He sent this photo to his friends using the $$ Telegram handle. Lam also admitted in a police interview to using the $$ Telegram handle, committing cryptocurrency theft, and dividing up stolen funds, and laundering the crypto assets through cryptocurrency exchanges. Serrano reportedly created an account on Trade Ogre, a digital currency exchange, to make a deposit of about $29 million worth of crypto. You are not going to believe that despite his tech savviness, he didn't use a VPN while creating the account. Either the boys were too confident that the authorities wouldn't reach them, or too careless for their own good. Nevertheless, records from Trade Ogre linked his account to an IP address registered to Serrano's Encino home. Lam wasn't just some small-time scammer. He had orchestrated one of the largest crypto heists in US history. The government ought to make an example of him. On September 19, 2024, just the day before his arrest, federal prosecutors formally charged him in a US district court in Florida. Lam was staring down 20 years in federal prison, and the financial penalties were just as severe. If convicted, he would be fined up to $250,000 per charge, or even worse, twice the amount he stole. That's $460 million in potential fines. His case was transferred to Washington, D.C., where prosecutors laid out the full scale of the operation. They had screenshots of Lam and Serrano discussing the heist, records from the stolen Bitcoin transfers, footage of Lam's reckless spending spree, testimonies from club owners, car dealers, and rental agents. The evidence was incriminating. In November 2024, Lam appeared before a judge in Washington, D.C. for a pre-trial hearing. Sitting in a blue prison uniform, he listened as the prosecution revealed even more evidence, including chat logs from his seized phone that showed he had committed additional crypto frauds. But instead of dragging things out, Lam made a request. He asked for a speedy trial. Under US law, that meant his case had to move quickly, with no indefinite delays. His attorney, Scott Armstrong, claimed that Lam was just a 20-year-old caught up in a complicated case and vowed to fight the charges, but the prosecution wasn't backing down. Lam was denied bail. The judge ruled that he had no legal status in the US and was a flight risk. He was sent to Northern Neck Regional Jail in Virginia, where he would await trial. Meanwhile, Serrano seems to be negotiating a plea deal. Malone Lam is now sitting in a jail cell in Virginia, waiting for his day in court. But the story isn't over. Because while Lam may be locked up, there are still massive unanswered questions. Where's the missing money? Authorities have only recovered part of the stolen $230 million. Out of the 31 luxury cars Lam bought, 22 are still unaccounted for. Some of the stolen Bitcoin may have been moved through anonymous wallets and exchanges, making it nearly impossible to trace. Moreover, could Lam and Serrano have other hidden accounts that haven't been found yet? Right now, the FBI is still investigating where the rest of the money went. What does this mean for crypto crime? Lam's case is one of the biggest individual crypto thefts in history. It proves that no matter how sophisticated a scam is, law enforcement is catching up. Crypto laundering tactics like peel chains, mixers, and VPNs aren't foolproof anymore. And for scammers who think that they can steal millions and live like kings, Lam's story is a clear reminder. You might get away with it for a while, but in the end, the law catches up.